Occasionally I like to browse indie game websites such as GameJolt and Itch.io. This is how I often run into very weird games. The same can be said for Twitter or Kickstarter. Sometimes I'll come across a dev page for a game that catches my eye. This is how I found out about games like Over Her Loving Embrace and more recently Nyanroo the Supercat. I had been following Nyanroo's Kickstarter briefly as I really wanted to see it succeed, but unfortunately the Kickstarter ended up falling a bit short. Thankfully, the developers decided to continue development with the game releasing in early access on Steam. Needless to say, I did not hesitate to buy the game, so today, let's take a look at Nyanroo the Supercat. The story is your typical good guys versus bad guys shtick. It's especially cliched with the cats versus dogs trope, but I don't feel like I've seen it explored as often in the realm of gaming, so I'm fine with it here. Plus, a platformer doesn't need a deep story to be good anyhow, so as long as what's there is decent, I'm okay with it. The basic rundown is that in the world of the game, an ancient cloth exists that can grant great power to the holder. The cloth has been used by many great heroes, including Papyrus. Why is Papyrus here? Not gonna lie, that's a bit of a clever reference even if it is shoehorned in. After that, we cut to the most recent bearer of the cloth's power, Tornado Ted. Dude, this really is just a Saturday morning cartoon. We've got the ancient relic thing, wacky bad guys, and ridiculous names. I'm loving it, this is so charming. Anyway, Ted and the evil dude Iron Face are duking it out over the cloth. Ted uses his life force to generate enough energy for a laser blast to kill him, and the cloth ends up in the paws of a random street cat named Nyanroo. Barkrow, the evil dude's dog, wants Nyanroo's newfound cloth for its powers to avenge his owner, so Nyanroo sets out to stop Barkrow's evil scheme while facing his league of evil dogs along the way. If you haven't already caught on with the footage, Nyanroo the Supercat is a side-scrolling 2D platformer. Nyanroo is a bit of a unique take on retro-inspired platformers, not because of a unique twist in gameplay or mechanics, but because of its primary focus on playing like a classic Mega Drive or Genesis platformer. Despite not playing many of them myself, I'll say it caught me off guard immediately, as the game would genuinely fit right at home with the classics. The game carries its inspirations on its sleeve, with the art style and soundtrack having that classic Genesis sound to it. This certainly helps it stand out in the crowd of other indie platformers, but is the gameplay any good? Well, yes. The game focuses on split pathway exploration, thus keeping the gameplay constantly interesting with a handful of things to discover in every level. This is partially thanks to the hero missions. These are optional challenges to complete in the levels. From saving pets to defeating a boss without getting hurt, it makes for a great replay incentive. Nyanroo will have plenty of challenges to face as well with the game's weird enemies, bosses, and such. The game really emphasizes to you to watch enemy patterns closely, but even still I find a few a bit unpredictable, like the spring frog and the crab. Yeah, I don't know what's up with the completely random assortment of baddies, but I'm not gonna question it. Occasionally, and I do mean occasionally, the game has some issues with these enemies and the knockback they can cause. It's not as bad as games like Castlevania, but I do feel like that's where the retro inspiration can get a tiny bit frustrating. Nyanroo has two attacks for damaging enemies, a side swipe and a lower swipe that can be activated mid-air. If this were literally any other game, it would only have the side swipe, but I'm super glad it has both, as it unequivocally makes combat fun and useful for platforming challenges. That's not to say it's perfect, as in certain situations you'll have to cross a gap using the mid-air swipe just before you hit an enemy, and getting the timing down does take a bit of practice. Those aren't Nyanroo's only abilities, as he can buy some at the shop in the weird checkpoint limbo. If you hold up while standing in front of a checkpoint, you'll be sent to this weird limbo space place, and this is where the shop is located. Currently, the only available upgrade is the air step, but I'm thinking there's some potential for cool upgrades to be added down the line to balance the difficulty. He also has access to some temporary power-ups by use of specially colored yarn balls. While they certainly aren't treated like Mario power-ups, I think the amount of time given with each one is fair for the levels they're used in. We've got the orange yarn ball, giving Nyanroo fireballs to lob at enemies. This is probably my favorite one, as it's the most versatile and especially useful for combat. There's also the blue yarn ball, which grants the power of flight. This one is much more limited compared to the other two, and it's a lot harder to hit enemies with it in the regular levels. Lastly, we have the white yarn ball, which lets Nyanroo breathe underwater for much longer, and he can dispense some of his air to push enemies or objects away if he's on land, and shoot bubbles if he's underwater. From the looks of it, Nyanroo will have plenty of abilities by the time the full game is released, and so far I'm all for it. They're really nice refreshers for gameplay, providing fun variety in movesets. The game mostly consists of 2D platforming stages, but it does have a shoot 'em up level, which is okay, but I don't think it adds much to the game. It's very basic. I think if they added more cool power-ups, I'd be down with it, but it doesn't take away from the main experience at least. The main levels give plenty of neat little gimmicks to spice things up, and I really like the areas you explore in the game. The city, sewers, a forest, it's certainly got a lot of variety and theming, though I think some improvements could be made as the color palette and shading is pretty basic. Personally, I'm okay with it, but you know, just a suggestion. So far, the bosses have surprised me the most in the game. With indie platformers, I'm always kind of afraid that the bosses will have very predictable attack patterns, but that's not quite the case with Nyanroo. The bosses start off difficult, but once you get their patterns down, they become easy but really fun. My favorite boss is either Pudge or the Pirate Dog, as his boss fight is literally just an RPG. It's ridiculous. Pudge was definitely the hardest with his different forms, but if you keep at it, he does become easier. But that is a majority of the content currently available in Nyanroo's early access release, so I don't think there's too much else to say about the game. Overall, Nyanroo started off a bit rough, get it because dogs, I'm so funny, please subscribe, with everything you have to get used to, as well as some of the issues I had with the camera making specific platforms harder to see, but I quickly grew to enjoy it super duper well despite that. It's not hard for me to recommend the game. So far it's about an hour and a half long, but with the hero missions I can certainly see myself coming back to get 100%. It is a super charming game, and I am very much excited to see what's in store for this funky little cat. So it's Wisp, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.